Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to Sayed Ammar Live. It's Friday night and we have a wonderful discussion tonight, as we do every Friday night. And tonight we'll be discussing issues affecting the community, both in the UK and across the pond. And especially one particular issue, which I'll come to later on, about a program that we had a couple of weeks ago that seems to have somewhat of an effect on certain theological communities in the US. But on a local note, of course, we've had the local elections across the UK, and a number of questions have arisen about Muslim participation. Have the Muslims participated? Have the Muslims thought about their future in the UK? Who should Muslims have voted for? Who was successful? Who isn't? And of course, there are a number of key voices that we have to discuss tonight, ranging from Farage to Robinson. And with us, we have a special guest who I'm sure will be well equipped, as well as an expert in this area. But before I get to our special guest, there's a special co-host, and that is, of course, Mufti Allama Minhal al-Khafaji. Mini, salam alaikum. Oh, God.
Salam alaikum.
The thing is, I'm going to keep doing this show every Friday night until the end of May. And I'm going to have to keep listening to Arsenal fans, even after cheating, even after VAR decisions go their way. Yalla, go on. It's yours.
After review, West Ham number 19 commits a foul on the goalkeeper. Final decision, direct free kick, is the best thing I have heard all week.
I can't believe this.
Gina?
You know how many of us were getting ready to message. We were all getting ready. Everybody in every WhatsApp group was getting ready with that message.
Oh my God. Do you know, I think every single dua I have made my whole life was answered on that night.
No, and you guys, I think there's one thing you've mastered. We already touched on it before. You've mastered 1-0 to the Arsenal.
Yeah.
But just tell me one thing. What was your feeling as Fernandez goes through one-on-one with Raya? He's through. And what are you thinking?
I was saying not all over again, not again. When he saves it, I literally went, Raya saved our season. He has saved our season. Because that is 5 yards.
I was watching it and I see Fernandez go through, and there's this whole part of the goal that's open to the left of Raya, and he decides to go for the near post. And I'm in disbelief. And then I knew it. Arsenal's going to win. But then I didn't think that was going to come to a VAR decision in the last second. And also, Arsenal's mastered this thing where whenever they concede a goal, and people can go and look at this, I've seen it a few times. Whenever they concede a goal, at least 5-6 players will run to the ref. Even if nothing's happened, they'll all run to the ref saying there's a foul. In the hope that any touch, anything could go possibly to VAR.
Complain to PGMOL, don't complain to me.
You've been preparing that one for the whole week. How many people have you replied with that one line to? Honestly, how many people?
All the Spurs fans, all the United fans, all the Liverpool, Chelsea, every single fan has had that reply. And guess what? Burnley is next, already relegated.
Yeah.
Palace get 10 million extra if Eze wins the league. So what do you think is going to happen on that final day?
No, the league's done. The league's done. And congratulations to Arsenal. Congratulations.
After review.
Yeah.
That whole segment. Someone got it tattooed on their arm.
Yeah. This is, as I think Gary Neville said, is the most important VAR decision ever. I've never seen Liverpool and United fans so united to want to see one club fall as they have for Arsenal.
Considering you guys haven't had a direct transaction for since the 70s.
With who?
Liverpool United.
I don't think we've never had a direct transaction.
I think only since the 70s.
Or maybe 1920s or something. Liverpool United never have direct transactions. There always has to be somebody go to another club and then join. For example, your
on that day you were united.
No, on that day everyone was united. Everyone. But congratulations on winning the league. Honestly, and I'm sure we're looking forward to a wonderful show tonight, because my dear brothers and sisters, tonight we're joined by somebody who is a childhood friend of mine, a lifelong friend of mine, someone I consider a brother, actually. I don't consider him a friend. I consider him a brother. We've been through thick and thin, sometimes through very, very thick. and some very good times and some very difficult times and some very interesting times and some very fun times. And inshallah, God's the witness to all the services that we've done together in the community over the years. And many of you may be wondering who this is. If you're in the UK, you know his name. And if you're outside of the UK, it'll be a great introduction if you haven't heard of him before. Let's take a little glimpse at the interesting world of my special guest, Mustafa Field.
Tomorrow I'll be voting Labour here in Banjul. For me, local elections are not just about party politics, they're about the people. People who understand the area, who knows eternity and will be part of the local life long before our elections. The Labour candidates in Banjul I've known for many years. They've been doing good community work. They're local people, they're representative people I know in the borough. They're not career politicians, they've not been parachuted in. That matters to me. In Brent, Labour has had to deal with a very difficult pressure. Years of austerity, rising adult social care, costs and growing changes in our neighbourhoods. I've also seen real efforts to support community organisations, faith groups, voluntary organisations, climate action work, bringing people together through community safety initiatives, and most importantly, community cohesion. I got involved in the voluntary sector because I believe government cannot solve everything on its own. We need local councils that support local people to organise, serve and build stronger communities together. So tomorrow, if you live in Barfield, I'll be voting Labour, and I hope you seriously consider doing the same. But also, please do look at all the candidates and ask questions and use your vote wisely. Strong councils matter, and so does a good opposition. So vote wisely. Take care.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Al-Hajj Mustafa Field.
Wa alaikum salam, Sayed.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, my brother. How's everything?
Alhamdulillah.
Amazing to have you on. Super happy.
Honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on, and there's so much to unpack. Just from that video alone, by the way. Firstly, who decided that the music should be louder than what
So not all of us have got these nice kitted out studios ready, Some of us have to use our phones.
I'm sure you've got access to most studios in London. So don't tell me, no, all of us have these. You've definitely got access to a few studios in London.
Sometimes we like it raw. Just do it.
Sure. I could agree with that as well. That makes perfect sense to me. But you know what? It's great. It's super to have you on here. We're both going to try and act as serious as possible in this conversation, even though in reality, being friends means that you're gonna be chilling most of the time and really enjoying a conversation also on some really serious issues. And first and foremost, what you're discussing over here. It was the week of the local elections. Britain's in the most uncertain period that I can remember. We grew up together in the 80s and 90s. But now when I look at Britain, it flabbergasts me when I see some of the rhetoric, and it seems alien to me because I've got so many non-Muslim friends who I played football with for years, who I've, sat on the terraces with. For goodness sake, I even wear Stone Island. Like, it's the second best brand after Sand Collection. You know what I mean? And when I'm wearing Stone Island, I'm an Iraqi, and I'm living in the UK, and I'm raised in the UK, and I'm wearing Stone Island. I've been to the terraces. I've watched my football club. I'm a season ticket holder, home and away. You could say that culturally, myself and many other Iraqis and many who are watching this show, be it the Liverpool fans, the Arsenal fans, who me and Minhal, are joking about, the United fans. We if you ask us who's our favorite club, we're not going to say Najaf or Karbala or Sharta or you know what I mean? We're gonna straight away talk about British football clubs. But now you're reaching the stage where you're looking at the emergence of what some have described as fascist language, fascist rhetoric, racist language, right-wing rhetoric. I want to ask you, last week, did you feel after the election results that we are heading towards a very dangerous period? Or was some of your fears maybe dispelled because you saw that, no, actually there was a good voter turnout. There's still people who have a hope to live in a socially pluralistic society without alienating a certain race, color, and so on.
I think the results really are quite shocking in terms of like how polarized views are and how communities are being played. And we're seeing how a lot of language, even the media is pushing, of sectarianizing, particularly targeting language that's targeting the Muslim community. Muslims are voting against sectarian lines, Islamist, anti-Semitism, and the threat of the Muslim community. There's a lot coming out there in the media, and you're seeing how elected politicians who are now elected. You got the Sunderland councillor who said, Nigerians should be melted to fill up potholes. It's really scary language that's being normalized by these elected officials who we're not sure what they have to offer. And all we're seeing is that they're scapegoating. So it is very worrying. If you think about it, when you see genocide, often it starts when politicians normalize hatred, otherization, and blaming minorities. And that's very scary. So it's a very scary precedent for the community. I think there is hope as well, as that I think, particularly the government needs to rethink, it's lost a lot of votes. It's lost people from the left and the right. And actually it needs to find a way of reconnecting, and there's an opportunity for there to find a way of reconnecting. We also saw how there's been a surge in the Green Party. A lot of Muslims are driving very economical cars, as you can see these days, as you can see, I'm sure. They're all, the green agenda is really, becoming a big thing. And I think there's a big agenda there that Muslims are trying to have their voice heard. And I think they're trying to protest sometimes through the democratic process, which I think is in itself helpful. Our democracy allows us to be able to raise their questions, show that they don't feel the political class. And I think we've also going to see that's being mirrored by right-wing groups. Unfortunately, far right, people really do feel the state has failed them. They're not being listened to. And it's been very easy to blame others, particularly migrants and the Muslims.
Because Farage and the reform movement, they were very successful when it came to Brexit. Do you see now as a similar period to that Brexit period where you're talking about a particular policy, but underlying it may have been a certain racist element? Is there a similarity with what you're seeing today?
To be honest, it's really baffling how they've been able to maintain this momentum. Brexit isn't seen as a success point. It's seen as, I rarely speak to anyone that sees, show me what Brexit has done to demonstrate, strengthen the British economy, growth, better jobs, better livelihood. It's very hard to point that. So it is a mystery in how, but what we've learned with Farage, he's very good at attacking the establishment. And he's very good at showing the weaknesses of the establishment. He's been very good at looking at vulnerabilities, blaming migrants for the whole thing about boats. And, when you're talking about the numbers, very insignificant. So it is really, really worrying in terms of how we as minorities, not just Muslim communities, are going to be treated in this country. You've seen mobs attacking asylum seeker hotels. You've seen, we've heard of instances of people being attacked violently, abused. So it's getting worse in this country.
Can't the British, for example, argue that, look, Russia and Belarus, they're not signatories to a European Convention of Human Rights. The French, if they want to send back an Islamist, even though they are signatories to the ECHR, the French can send back an Islamist when they feel like it, for example. So why is it that the British have to be the one who welcome everybody from France? Because they try to push this idea about, the Rwanda movement, for example, or sending someone straight back to France. What is it that's wrong in the British conclusion on this issue?
I think it's a very good question. I think I want to move a bit backwards and I think actually first, have we really educated the average Brit about the contribution of minorities in this country? So when you look at World War I, World War II, often it was the Commonwealth nations that were on the front line of defending Britain. How much do we appreciate the contribution of Britain? They say that in America, for example, when we talk about this narrative is growing across the West. 1 in 4 of the Africans who came to help build America were Muslim.
Sure.
And so that story has never been picked up. So if you, focus on, like demonizing your minorities who've built this country where it is today, the industrialist, infrastructure, I think there's a real challenge for us to think about how do we tell our story? And I think us as Muslims have been very bad about learning about the history of Muslims in this country,
Sure.
the contribution. Yesterday we saw, let me say that, earlier this week we saw Naz Shah, who spoke in the House of Commons, welcoming His Majesty's speech. And she spoke about the contributions of Muslims in Bradford and how, the curry has become a mainstream meal. And it's really, really important to think about how we present ourselves as part of British culture and that we are contributing to Britain. We are at a disadvantage because, unfortunately, it seems to be it's easier for the media to share stories about minorities being, challenged. And what we're seeing is an agenda being played to divide communities, playing communities against each other, and particularly minorities playing against each other. So I guess we've got to find ways to navigate this. Think, long term. I think when your introductory question is like, do we even care? Are we even thinking about our future in this country? Do we consider ourselves as British Muslims? Do we, as a Shia community, do we have a vision for ourselves in the next 10 years in this country? And I think that's a big difference between the British Shia diaspora and the American Shia diaspora, where I think Americans have a greater commitment to being part of American society. They have a vision. They're building institutions that are looking at serving their community in 10, 20 years' time.
It's a tricky one because this is a huge dilemma when a person says, whenever we get active and whenever we try and show how much we're participating, whenever we try and show just how many Muslims are on the front lines helping people in the medical field, for example, in any emergency situation, it seems like this falls on deaf ears. And you've got some Muslims who are now saying, why do I need to keep on harping on about the fact that I'm part of this country when no one seems to be taking any notice? The more the Muslim says, I've got a future in this country and I've been raised in this country, the more we're seeing right-wing elements getting stronger and stronger. So don't you sometimes, a person could look at someone and say, I don't blame you for, having certain apathy on these issues because they don't seem to be achieving results. If there's this clip that I saw where the rhetoric that was being used was crazy. It was just like, it was the most racist rhetoric you'll ever come across. I know, Buster, if you could play that clip, let's have a look at it.
Well, they need to stop the boats coming in, because what they have no intention to do all.
And we call each other the N-word on the regular.
I went undercover as a fake news reporter to one of the UK's biggest racist protests to see what I could uncover. What would you do?
Get rid of all foreign cunts that don't belong here. Send them fucking back. So, why can they come in here and just get it put in 5-star hotels? You tell me that. And all we want is best for our kids, and all you hear is our kids all the time. These illegals, but you should all get fucked off. Put army in charge and fuck your immigrants up your ass.
BK, what do you say? Yeah.
So if you was Prime Minister for one day, what would you...
Be like the Polish people, mate. All people laid up the border, so...
You would commit...
Mate. Yeah, I'd have to, yeah. Well, they need to stop the boats coming in, because what they have no intention to do all.
It'd be like the Polish people, lay everyone down and just kill them. Now, on the one hand, you've got certain Nazi rhetoric there. On the other hand, the other person who was speaking there, is his attack purely on migration, or is this actually extending to the Muslim community who have been here for 30, 40 years?
I think, the attack on migrants often it's synonymous with Muslims. Often when you're thinking about migrants, they're talking about Syrians, Afghans, Iraqis coming to this country. And, there's a lot of negative rhetoric towards the Pakistanis. When you think about the grooming gangs arguments that they're providing and building a narrative that Muslim men are preying on white English girls. They're building a narrative there. It's very dangerous. And this is often supported by a political class who have justified, doing this for their election gain. And it's really scary. And I think, once you start normalizing people, so there is a big challenge. And I think, I guess for us the challenge is, how do we, we sit in our Husseiniyyas, we sit in our centers, we're very isolated as a Shia community.
Sure.
We're known for being insular.
Sure.
And we've got to recognize and think about, how do we break that and break beyond this?
On this grooming guy, just to interrupt you, we'll always give football examples. I can think of 2 football players who groomed 15-year-old girls, and that would be seen as minors, if I'm not mistaken, and of course illegal, and a criminal act. One of them, and you guys can look this up, one of them was Adam Johnson, used to play for Sunderland. And another one recently was the Bournemouth right back, whose name I think is Jimenez. Now, of course, with one of them he got charged, and the other one I think is an ongoing case. And it's unbelievable how you could pick up the grooming issue and now associate it that it's Muslim who is grooming white girls, when I could show you 2 football players who have got nothing to do with Islam, who were the ones who were grooming young girls by messaging them or trying to go out with them and so on and so forth. So what's being done to show, look, you can't generalize. What can be done to show that these are generalizations? Because they're going to get out of hand. You said something very interesting earlier. You said you got to educate the people to know what is the history of Muslims in the UK, what contributions of the Muslims done in the UK. But there's this other angle, which is also, how can we list examples where that's not a Muslim who's done that? That's a white guy who's raped another person from the white community. If you go to the jails, if I'm not mistaken, you can go and see the statistics. There are so many people who have got nothing to do with Islam who are the biggest perpetrators of crimes in the UK. What would you do to try and increase this education? And the current Labour government, have they made an active effort to try and dispel these stereotypes?
I think firstly, I think what you're seeing is a lot of minority communities, and we saw even during COVID how the Black Lives Matter campaign came up, and how it was being targeted, and we saw these race riots happening, particularly the far right mobilizing in parts of central London, just like we're going to see this weekend, who are getting louder and they're being fueled by these fake news stories. So there's something about us. How do we counter people's lived experiences? Because people are being isolated, people are losing, and they're being consumed by news that shows, Muslims, migrants who are doing evil things. So you hear of a story of an Afghan refugee chirping some young girl, underage girl, and this is the challenge that we're hearing. And so we've got to find ways of navigating this. I think there are migrant groups that are doing work around this. There's Muslim groups that are doing. There's a number of Muslim institutions that are building up. The government has put money into an organization called the British Muslim Trust. Not enough, but it's put money towards reporting Islamophobia. Now I speak to a lot of people who are victims of hate crime in the Muslim community. Often people call me. Getting Muslims to raise awareness about them, so even reporting in hate crime, is really, really difficult in our community. And if we're not able to demonstrate how much the impact this is having, we're hearing horrific stories of Muslims being, Muslim women being sexually harassed, in this society because of their identity. Okay,
wasn't there a Sikh who was harassed? A Sikh was raped, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and they thought that it was a Muslim lady, wasn't it?
It's horrifying, and sadly, I'm speaking to hearing the victims in some of these situations, is that if they said they experienced this, they may be told by their families not to go out anymore.
Sure.
They may be stigmatized because they've dressed inappropriately in some people's perspectives. And so it's actually, they're not even reporting these incidents. So it's creating a very hostile environment. But we've got to be optimistic. I'm an optimist. I think we've got to build alliances with other communities. We are, you know, I'm on a WhatsApp group with these young British people who are all, they're like, my dad's starting to vote reform. We're starting to read this race. So there's a real concern, even amongst British people, about how dangerous some of these fake misinformation is coming in. We know the Russians, for example, are using these tools to disrupt British democracy. And so there's some real concerns here.
Look at that man given life sentence for rape and religiously aggravated assault of a Sikh woman. What's his name? Javed? Dav? Mo? Ali? Ja'far? What's his name? Because if everybody keeps saying that it's the Muslims who are causing trouble, or like you said, some Afghani chirps someone or some Pakistani groom someone, hey, this person does not look like a...
It's a sick story.
You know, it's very sad. Very, very sad. John Ashby. Now, I've been to enough mosques in the world to know that there's not many John Ashbys. And I've also been to enough churches in the world to know that there have been priests of Christianity who've abused kids. So if you want to go into the world of sexual crimes, I could also go to Weinstein and co. and look at somebody like Epstein and see members of the Jewish community who were abusing sexually and pedophiles. So what am I going to do? I'm going to generalize on the whole Muslim community, but I don't want to call out. And this is something interesting about Farage. Sometimes Farage does give this impression of we want to return to a Judeo-Christian Britain. What's a Judeo-Christian Britain? Is Britain's history Judeo-Christian? I don't know. Where does that world come from? There was a very interesting clip, I don't know if Basri can give for us, where this doctor actually talks to Farage about his opinions on immigration. And I was very touched by not only the clarity, the eloquence of this doctor, but also the wisdom in the way that he was speaking. Let's have a look at this.
People check my race. I work with asylum seekers. I work with people. I've been in the ocean to save people's lives. I've listened to these people cry their eyes out to me. People have been tortured. I don't think it's okay to throw them under the bus. I don't think it's okay to say that they're the problem in this country. You're very charismatic. You're very good with your words. I think that you have a lot of power in your hands. But I just think that we should give these vulnerable people. I mean, had difficult lives. I'm not talking about the ones that hear grooming people. I'm not talking about them, because I know that we want to attack them. I'm talking about all the women that tell me that they've been raped and attacked, all the women that have been, men that have been tortured from other countries. But they cry their eyes out to me. I work in the medical department, they cry their eyes out to me. And when I've been abroad, they cry their eyes out to me. Because I'm their doctor. I'm the responsible one looking after them. I can't attack them. I have to be compassionate. By the way, we have to look after them as much as possible. It doesn't matter if they're British or not.
We've always been generous, but
look after the country. Thank you.
Mustafa, how open is Nigel Farage and his team to dialogue?
I think we've got open dialogue. Yesterday I was speaking to a friend. His whole local authority has gone reform. You know, so he is in a place like Walsall. The council switched to reform. What does he do as someone who lives there, who represents the Muslim community in that area? What do? He's like, am I staff? Should I congratulate them? Should I open up dialogue? And I think dialogue is really, really important. Now, are they going to be receptive? I don't know. Okay. What I do know is when we've engaged, we've been able to shed better light, let them understand the contribution of the Muslim community. Muslims, our kids are going into schools in this country. Okay. They need to be protected. We are running businesses. We're part of the working class in this country. And we need to demonstrate to them that, we need to work towards building a greater Britain. I looked at the manifesto of the Walsall Council Reform Party, and they talked about heritage, they talked about protecting servicemen, but actually they've lost community. And actually we as Muslims, something that we have very lucky is that we have a community. And I think there's an opportunity for us to think about how we open up spaces. How do we reach out? Because you see the adult social care is the biggest thing surging in most local government institutions, because older people are not being looked after. Yes, we're having an aging population. Yes, people are living longer, but also they're living more lonely and they're not being protected. And I think there's something that we can do to contribute to that. We've got to change the narrative about looking at Muslims just as a problem, but actually looking at Muslims as we are building something really positive in this country. And we've got to look at how we can delve into cooperating with other groups to get them to listen to us more effectively.
I was actually flabbergasted. I don't know about you guys. I was actually flabbergasted when I was looking online, especially on Instagram. We've got a lot of Muslims who are running for seats in the local election. Like, when you go to, for example, like we got Sister Nasreen Kazmi in Watford. I think you know Nasreen. I guarantee you many people who live in that area wouldn't have a clue that on a personal level, we have a Shia sister who was running in the local elections. Okay, many people wouldn't even know that she does this work. Then you've got, for example, in Birmingham, there's some Muslims who've been in their seats for a long time, have been running for a long time. Even the further up north you get, I think the Pakistani community, there's been a lot of active Muslims in these areas. But is there always that danger that when you enter politics, you could always be stereotyped or even sometimes accused of being a coconut? Politics is full of deception. You're going to have to work with people who you disagree with, and these people are going to, one way or the other, make you compromise your values. Do you think sometimes is that a problem that makes the Muslim community not want to aspire to pushing more of their children and more of their youth to be politically active?
I think it's a lack of confidence. It's almost a colonial mindset that's built in. We don't think we can be better. We feel that we have to compromise in our faith when we go there. And I think like sometimes, for example, I was in His Majesty's garden party the other day. I went in an Arab dress. It's really about that we've got to own our cultural identity. We've got to be confident who we are. I think as Shia sometimes, we're really uncomfortable. So, in being who we are. So we're not happy to be talking about as a Shia community. I think it's really important that we develop that confidence, that we can influence change, that we can be ourselves. And I think there's this sort of shyness that we find in the Shia community in doing this. It has been really positive to see a lot of people from the Shia community who stepped up this year in the local elections.
Give me examples.
I know two sisters who stood up for the Greens, one in South London, one in North London. Well done to them. They both didn't get in, but they fought a good battle.
Sure.
We've got Shias in South London. I know some Shias who didn't get through, but generally for a community that's,
the start
400,000 at least in the UK.
Yep.
We have very little participation, very little engagement. And it's not always about having a seat, it's about having influence, developing a relationship. You started that this show with my video where I spoke about in Barn Hill. I know these two councillors. I can vouch for them. I know that I can, leverage them to develop local services, enhance local services, put pressure on the local authority to make sure that our roads are better, that we are able to get the right planning decisions, making sure that the assets that belong to us, because we're all taxpayers, that we have an influence in what direction they take. So I think it's about us having a relationship, not just standing, but having a relationship with politicians. And that's really difficult for us because, number one, we're not confident. We're socially excluded because, look, a lot of this stuff, networking, the mingling happens in the bars.
Sure.
If you want to network with politicians, I was selected to stand for election in 2013. And I had 3 MPs join me for campaigning. They're all now senior government in the government. And you know what? After doing a day of campaigning, it was them and some of my Muslim friends who said, let's go to the pub and sit down. And I just said, do you know what? I feel this is going to compromise me. I feel this is difficult. I also felt that, people won't understand me. Okay. But really, I felt like I was at a stage, I was saying, I don't want to be sitting down in a pub after doing a lot of work, which I think is real citizenship work. We think we should see ourselves as real citizens. We have rights in this country. We need to make sure we claim those rights. But we also have responsibilities. And I think that understanding comes from the Shia scholarship. I think often we in this country don't really think about fulfilling our responsibilities as citizens in this country.
Sure.
And whenever, I'm sure you've met many scholars in Najaf, in other holy cities, who will be very clear about our duties in fulfilling our obligations and claiming our rights in that discourse. Because I think that creates a contract between us as citizens. And I think because we are a little bit divided and because we don't like where things are going, we feel that we want to protest. Let's not engage. Let's isolate from what's happening around us. But actually, we've got a story. We've made a contribution. You know, I think we've been really successful as a community in being really involved in championing, you know, health service. You know, if you think about the Shia community, our contribution during COVID was big. Sadly, how many doctors and nurses and people in the you know, made huge contributions and suffered for that. Some of them lost their lives. So we're not really proud of that story. We need to be more proud of that story and spreading that. So I think that's where that's the only way we're going to make a difference in this country and protect ourselves by seeing ourselves as citizens of this country, and that we're going to be on the table, not on the table.
It's interesting you say that, because obviously, having worked together for years, we had always the same vision for our community. From going back, many of the viewers may not know, but myself and Mustafa worked together from at least 25 years back. So many people will see my development as a lecturer, but alongside that, one of the people who was always a backbone in the organizing of programs and the organizing of majalis, but also the organizing of camps and retreats, and the organizing of ziyaras and umras, and the organizing of getting the community together at difficult times, was Mustafa. And a lot of that you gained, of course, from your mother, may God bless her soul, who was extremely active. Your parents were amongst the first people who, you know, were in the UK, and they were always like a safe haven for families who had arrived. And your mother was with the Iraqi Welfare Association. So Mustafa's not just somebody who's decided that I'm going to pick this up, you know, in my late 30s as a career change. His vision of working within the community and interacting with those outside of the community has been witnessed by everybody in the Shia community, especially in the UK. From London to Manchester, if you go all the way up north, wherever you go, people in one way or the other have either worked with him or cooperated with him or sat with him and also sought his advice on a number of issues. So we're talking about someone who's got vast experience in this area. But at the same time, this comes with its challenges as well, because I'm sure that over these past 25 years, in the same way that I've had challenges with my lecturing, you know, and with the opinions that you posit when you lecture and so on, what comes with that whole territory. Likewise, when you enter the territory of politics, of interfaith work, you've got the organization Faith Forums, you know, so when you're entering that sphere, you're bound to come across certain people who you may have a completely different worldview to. How do you deal with such people, especially in sensitive times? Because you said that maybe sometimes the Shia community, the form of protest becomes isolation, not engagement. And that's completely opposite to your philosophy, which is, well, if there is a form of protest, it can be in more engagement and less isolation. You've been called out recently as being somebody who's done a lot of good work, but at the same time, who sits in meetings, in interactions, in dialogue with people in the British establishment who are pro-Israel, who have certain Zionist opinions, who have maybe certain even opinions which look down at Muslims. I'd like to play this clip, which was the one that really began a conversation about just how beneficial the work that you do really is, as well as raising concerns about the relations that one picks up along the way. So let's play this clip and see what Professor Miller is saying in this clip.
What they're going to do is they're going to, and this is what they've been doing for some time, and this campaign is now going on steroids, is that they will attack Shia Muslim organisations. That's the game plan. They will attack, in particular, Shia Muslim charities, mosques, Muslim organisations, and that's part of the agenda. And they've been doing this for a long time, actually. I mean, you want to talk about Lord Walney's new report. So they've been trying to target the Shia community for some considerable time. The British intelligence services have strategies to deal with and subvert not just the Muslim community, but specifically Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, and they have different strategies for both, and they recruit people who can be their intelligence agency cutouts. So there's a guy called Qari Asim, who is the cutout for Sunnis, and there's a guy called Mustafa Field, who is the intelligence cutout for penetrating the Shia community. And they've been doing this for 15 years at least, and they fund the organizations which these Muslim cutouts have to try and subvert and indeed spy on both Sunni and Shia Muslim communities, and that of course helps them then to start to attack particular charities which they deem to be not sufficiently docile to British intelligence.
There's pretty strong words there. Spy on. How do you reply to what he's just said?
I think, sadly, it's really sad that such misinformation is, number one, being spread in our community. And I guess it comes from a lack of confidence that we as a community can be on the same par and contribute and engage at a high level. Often, someone like David Miller often tries to associate this person is connected to this person, who connects to this person. Jeremy Corbyn is a Zionist. Absurd things that everyone knows that Jeremy Corbyn has been a target of the Israeli lobby. We know that this organization is connected to this organization, so that means you're working with people who are supporting Israel. I think, number one, I think people don't understand my role. My role is I'm a director of an interfaith charity. So my role is to bring different communities together to work on common interests. So I bring all different faith communities together. We want to bring people together. So I don't sit down as a representative of the Shia community when I work in my role. So other than when I'm working in a majlis, serving in my local Husseiniya, running a camp for the community, and also or mentoring young people in the community, that's me as Mustafa, who's a volunteer within the Shia community, helping different religious institutions. But when it's Mustafa who's running an interfaith charity, I'm trying to make sure minoritized communities are on the table.
So you're not a Muslim on that table?
No, I'm the director. I bring people together. I'm the convener. I bring together the different faith groups to come and have a space and a discussion.
So you would bring a Muslim cleric to sit on that table?
Yes.
It wouldn't be you?
Or representatives of different organizations. So sometimes we'll bring an organization, they will appoint a representative and they'll engage at that spectrum. My job has never been to...
Is Qari Asim's job the same?
Qari is a imam. He's a representative.
Sure, that's what I'm trying to understand, because it's different.
Yeah, he's very
If
different.
he's an imam, he's already on that front line. You're saying that I'm not an imam. I have a interfaith forum. I just bring the rabbi, the priest, and the imam together.
Hindus, Buddhists,
all together. What happens if there is, for example, a priest who says to you that I believe in Christian Zionism and I believe that the state of Israel has every right to exist and I have no problem with attacking the woman, the children, and you're sitting in that gathering, what do you do at that situation?
So number one, that wouldn't happen. We have very clear terms of reference and engagement.
Sure.
So we talk about voter participation, mental health, NHS, engagement and faith communities. Make sure the faith sector is engaged so that we'll have agenda. So there's not like if someone comes out and just starts talking about international issues, we close them down right away because that's not something that we would accept. But also, I would say that most of my colleagues who are faith representatives who sit on our council would find that very absurd and very horrific and would challenge that quite openly. I think we know sometimes... I think we've got to see the progress that's been made in Britain today. Today, the self-determination of the Palestinian people has been recognized. Often that's been done by behind the scenes by faith community leaders pushing for support. Now, this recognition is not enough for the Palestinian people. But actually, I would say behind the scenes, and I've seen it firsthand, the work of different faith communities to lobby, to support the recognition of the Palestinian people.
Give us an example.
I think... Number one, lobbying on their MPs, bringing the Palestinian ambassador to speak in audiences in churches. We don't see what we want. Even the internal battle when the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, rejected a Palestinian priest. That same Palestinian priest was invited in local churches, and that brought a lot of attendance because he was kind of like disengaged. And so that brought a conversation that Justin had said, actually, I think I made a big mistake there. And I think it's sometimes leadership for someone like that who's a global faith leader, as the Archbishop of Canterbury. He has, they have the Anglican community. He really didn't understand the mood of the church. Now we've got to work with different communities to understand, and we will bring people from different visions. So it's actually, it'd be really interesting if someone said that. I'd probably find that some of our Jewish colleagues would challenge them, and no one would advocate for violence against Palestinians. And I think there's a strong movement in this country that is much more aware of the tragic experiences that many Palestinians are experiencing, the war crimes that we've seen, okay, and not something just the Muslim community is seeing, okay. And I think people are disgruntled because Greens didn't come in different areas. People are protest voting because they're seeing this country losing, it's not having the same strength. And I think even like Britain's having a softer position with Iran. Now, many of us may not agree, but I think it's very important to see that actually there is some penetration in terms of how we're influencing how this country operates. That the government is more hesitant in going gung-ho and following the US agenda. So I think the agenda is changing. Britain has been more critical of Israel than it's ever been. It's also been more pro-Palestinian. It's how many years late has it? Why was Palestine never, not recognized all these times? So there's a really deep conversation happening amongst and many of the biggest allies of the Palestinian community is Christians. Not just because Palestinians are Christians and Muslims.
Yes,
and actually, so they're starting to feel that pain. And I think we need to work with different communities to see that. I think interfaith has the opportunity to bring communities together, to look at opportunities for us to raise common issues. In my organization, we don't deal with international issues just because it gets really, really complicated. We are a faith forum for London. We're focused on London issues. We want to make sure that London has a good influence. We support faith institutions. So many of those institutions are Shia. We'll support Shia institutions. We'll connect them with Twitter when they are good. Since Musk has taken over, we've really disengaged with Twitter because we don't think it's the right image. But getting kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and using the faith sector is a powerful tool to ensure that young people from those communities are engaged in tech. We've got relationships with different football clubs, and making sure those young people have the experience of watching football games, particularly the women's games. So participating in that, because it's not, yes, the global stuff is really big, but, lived experience of people in this country, our faith is feeling like it's suppressed. We can't talk about our faith. Yesterday, a few days ago, I was speaking to someone, at the Michaela School in Wembley. Number one, they're restricted from prayers. They got really draconian, and there's a real sense there's a discrimination against students from faith communities. And we've got to work together with other faiths in a united way to get our voice on the table, to make sure.
Do you sometimes feel it's the Muslim community that's always reaching out to, for example, the Jewish community? Like I rarely ever see glimpses of, Golders Green, Hampstead, St. John's Wood, turning around and say, we can't wait to engage with the Muslim community. Is it always that you've got to try and say, please let us get together? Or have you seen that there are certain elements that have tried to
I think there's
bring the communities together?
There's a lot of engagement with, from the Jewish community into build relationships with the Muslim community. So a lot of that is there's no secret that the Jewish community are very open and trying to open up iftars within their synagogues, trying to welcome the local Muslim community. We saw after the burning of in 2013, when the Somali Lebanese community was burnt, the mosque was burnt after the murder of Drummer Rigby. It was the first mosque that was burnt, and it was recorded as a hate crime towards a mosque. And that it was the local Jewish community that provided their space for the mosque to continue Taraweeh. It was Ramadan as well. And so there's some reciprocal work. There are organizations, but this is often, number one, there's a bit of, Jewish communities are divided themselves. They have different views about Israel. So even one synagogue, often you'll find that they have very divided opinions. And often it's it's harder for them to articulate themselves in some ways because they choose to stay away from projecting that political. And this is where like international events recently have really had a big impact on the Jewish community. But I think for us as Muslims, I think really this conversation is to the Muslim community, and it's about we need to think about how we reach out. And I don't think we should compare ourselves to other communities. We need to be the best that we can be. When we speak to our scholars, they're saying be good citizens, be the best teacher, be the best doctor, be the best accountant, that people recognize the students of Ahlul Bayt, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, as the best in society. So it might not feel, but I think there's a lot of approachments. And I could say the same thing about Christians, are Christians, are they reaching out to Muslims? I think Christianity has different ways of manifesting. I would definitely say that often it was many white Anglican people who were doing work to protect refugees, to help the homeless. And, and earlier this year, I volunteered at a homeless shelter. It was in Harlesden. And I would say that 60% of the people staying were from Muslim backgrounds. It probably was eye-opening. I didn't think there'd be so many Muslims there. Okay. And it was mainly run by people from other communities. So I think we as a community need to reach out and be more confident about reaching out and being talking about our faith, because, people will come to me. Just this morning, I was having a discussion about Iran, and I was saying that, why we are so against this illegal war. And it's only through relationships and trust that you can really feel confident to articulate yourself and give a much more nuanced picture. Because, they'll Google me, they'll say, oh, he's against Iran. No. Experiencing, obviously we have different family members in Iran, both of us.
Yes.
Okay. And some of them will be very pro-government, some of them will be more critical, some of them have grievances with business issues in Iran. But the most important thing is that, we give a more accurate picture. And sadly, we start with people like this David Miller, he's been going out, calling out Iranian president for sitting down with the US on mediating, negotiating. He's calling him a traitor. Now, the challenge that we have is this language and divisive hatred by actors, and I really call them, actors like David Miller. It's very dangerous. The word traitor is very dangerous, because there's a sense of betrayal.
He's insinuating that obviously there's someone else paying you off. And what is the line between getting a grant from the government that may be funded by a Zionist organization? Would you reject that?
So we work with a number of organizations. So I wouldn't classify the organizations as Zionist. Number one, it's our taxpayers' money. So we have a full right to claim our taxpayers' money, and we need to make sure. Number two, we have trustees, and trustees provide a very strong layer of accountability as well. So although even like government will try and enforce the agenda, and it's not hidden that government sometimes will try and for example, Windrush. We saw the Windrush scandal and how people were affected. There's times that government will say you can work with us to support Windrush victims, but you can't criticize us. So they try to control, and that's sometimes done by naive legal teams. That's sometimes done by a coercive government agenda. I think we've got to be confident that if I want to go to the government and say, I want you to help me strengthen safeguarding across different faith communities, we've got to work with all communities. And that's what we do. I think we've become very skeptical. One of the young men recently was asking me, so why were you supportive of the king's coronation? I said, I love the king. I just said, I think the king is good. He talks about faith. He talks about religion. He gets things wrong sometimes, but it's only through engagement that we can influence him. Okay. And we've seen the impact of people 20, 30 years ago, inviting His Majesty, engaging with His Majesty, the king of this country, that has had. And we've seen how His Majesty, for example, his visit to the US, had a soft British lobbying. And that's really important. So we've got to be clever in how we engage with British public institutions, because what's the real danger is that if we don't build allies within the establishment and within other communities, what we're seeing with the rise of reform and the far right who are visibly, out there. Tomorrow we're looking at hijab being banned in schools, halal meat being banned in this country. So we've got to find ways of smart ways of addressing these issues and building allies. And that might be with people sometimes we're uncomfortable with, but often change is done by, and I don't know, like, I'm sure you've well read about, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, for example, and how that was done. We've seen that in Iraq. It's only been by coalitions often coming together that we've seen change. So I think, we've got to be much more confident in pushing a Shia Muslim agenda, in our community. And I often
Sure, because historically, there's always different examples given about whether one can work with a government that's non-Muslim, just, non-Muslim, tyrannical. And we've got examples on both. Non-Muslim just, one might look at Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam becoming a treasurer for the king of Egypt until he eventually becomes king. And then you've got non-Shia tyrannical, for example. You may have examples like Ali bin Yaqtin, where they have to perform taqiyya while in the court of Harun al-Rashid. You have Imam al-Rada alayhi salam pretty much coerced in the court of al-Ma'mun. You've got Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari alayhi salam in very difficult situations in Samarra, again with non-Shia. You've got people like Allam al-Hilli and Nasir al-Din al-Tusi in very interesting positions with either non-Muslims or with non-Shia. And so there have been different treatises that have been produced about whether it's permissible to liaise, stroke, cooperate, stroke, worth, stroke, even get, grants and funding from non-Muslim entities, non-Muslim governments. And I think sometimes people will be surprised about how lenient, maybe sometimes even Islamic law may be, that may make certain exceptions for people who are in that world, as long as they are ensuring that the Shia community is being benefited by you being in that position, for example. But of course, the people who make these judgments are the clerics. And would you say to me now that clerics have been supportive of what you've done? Because you could easily say to me, yes, clerics have been supportive. And I might turn around to you and say, which clerics? And you're not going to name those clerics because of a backlash that's going to happen to those clerics. Why are the clerics so scared to say that we are firmly behind Mustafa Field OBE? Why do they have to tell you in private? What is it that they fear from the community? If it's something that is, rational convention dictates people should work together. The Quran talks about people of the book should come together in dialogue. Why is it that the scholars in the community who you interact with quite regularly do not stand up and say that we understand what he's doing, we back him in what he's doing?
So I think firstly, the vast majority of our scholars are very pro-engagement. They want us to be more engaged. They want us to engage in consultations with politicians. They want us to invite, and they want that to be led by the people. They want business leaders in our community, our educationists to be involved in leading all of this. So I think that's really, really important, because I think people are trying to say that scholars do not want us to engage. This is completely false. Actually, they're really firm. Now, I've never asked scholars to back me.
Name me 3 scholars in London who have worked in interfaith and have been very open with their interfaith.
I think there's a large history of many of our scholars who've been.
Let me go back. I'm going to mention a couple, and you round it off with a third. I'll mention a couple. Said Fadl Milani.
Yeah.
Very active on interfaith. Very, very active. Before him, Said Majid al-Khoui. Not just active on interfaith, but intrafaith. Because with Said Majid al-Khoui, he was active in terms of with the American lobby against Saddam Hussein, but also with King Hussein of Jordan. With Tony Blair, if you remember, all of us in the Iraqi community will remember Tony Blair visiting Al-Khoui school. Is that true?
Yeah.
At the time, a question arose: is what Sayyid Majid has done, is that immoral by allowing people like King Hussein of Jordan, who many believe was complicit or funded even some of Saddam Hussein's war against the Shia in the Iraq-Iran war? So sometimes when people want to attack you, I think there are turbans and clerics before you who have engaged with royals of the Gulf states, Said Muqtada al-Sadr and Sayed Ammar al-Hakim, who engaged with Mohammed bin Salman, knowing Mohammed bin Salman, for example, was in a war with, for example, Yemen at the time. But here you have clerics. Said Jawad al-Khou'i, for example, very active in interfaith dialogue. So even if you look at the Khou'i family, being very active in dialogue, here you have, everybody can see at home, Said Majid al-Khou'i, Sheikh Fadl al-Sahlani, who is of course Ayatollah Sistani's wakil in New York, Tony Blair, and that was it Zaki Badawi?
The late Zaki Badawi.
The late Zaki Badawi, well, the late Said Majid, the late Zaki Badawi. And that picture, I think there's also one with Said Majid and King Hussein of Jordan, if Basri. So it's very interesting that people with some clerics who do this will remain silent because he's the son of a marja. But Mustafa Field is not the son of a marja.
So yeah, I think family names matter. I mean, it's a lot harder to target, but we know that
he also was on the receiving end. People at the end they even said that he was a...
Yeah, we know that there are, and I call them religious hooligans because they're like a mob. They attack their own scholars. I speak to a wide range of scholars. Some of them are like in tears sometimes. They're like, these guys are so aggressive that we worry for our own children.
Do the scholars engage them? Because this is very important for me. I've had controversial opinions over the years, but I've always been willing to engage. Without fail, every single year in the last 20 years, you know very well, we established the Ahlul Bayt societies back in the day. Without fail, every year, I will meet every generation of youth who are able to question me at a university event about any of my opinions. But I do believe there are others who may do this work, and are unhappy when people attack them, but they're not willing to engage in an open platform. Is there more need for that?
I think, look, our scholars are not being looked after by our community. We have some really bright individuals. There's no institution that really backs them to do interfaith. You can't expect people just to do it as volunteers, especially when there's a risk of backlash, especially when there's a risk of them getting real, threats and aggressive. And we've seen this in the past, sadly, there were people have, used very derogatory language in front of scholars in our community, people who serve the minbar. And look, I don't think we should raise our scholars' status so high. Often, many of them will say we are experts in jurisprudence at most. We're not here to give you a full-rounded, study on history or political studies. We're here to give you sort of guidance on what Sharia says at best. And it's for you to formulate those decisions. And it's for you to be held accountable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in reality, a lot of the changes that we see when we do public diplomacy work, and when we think about they plan 20, 30, 100 years ahead, often the reason why we say that is because the change that you see in politics, and people always say, what's the tangible result, Mustafa, from when I attended the interfaith meeting? That isn't there. That doesn't happen in that meeting. It's 5 years down the line that this priest is standing in front of a community who's asking him questions about this new mosque down the road, and he responds in a way that diffuses tensions. And I think it's about building relations. And these things can be small and these things can be big. So I think our scholars haven't been given the right infrastructure support. I do also think sometimes, you sometimes need to have the courage to address these issues. And we know that not all our scholars will say that I have a family. I'm not willing to sacrifice my family's life for this. Okay, and this because people attack their livelihood.
Were you a bit hurt when you felt some members of the community who had maybe grown up under your service and the things you had organized for the youth and the programs you had organized threw you under the bus and were ready to throw accusations?
I think we are disappointed. Hurt means we expect this. We've seen how people have ridiculed scholars who made huge achievements. I see a long line, even when you look at Imam Musa Sadr, for example, and his engagement around interfaith, he was criticized. We've seen great pioneers in reaching out. When working with other communities, particularly in the Shia community, because we've always been a minority, there's a lot of deep fear around us. So it's almost expected. It's disappointed that people don't ask. People don't sit down. People don't say, let me try and find out. Because who's this person on the internet who's spreading misinformation about you? Who is he who's, recently he wrote about the Iranian president. He wrote about Imam Ali, and made some comments. Who is this person? Why am I sharing this? But it is almost like we've become a community that shares misinformation, shares conspiracy. And this is a downfall of the Shia community. But these people, I never seen the Husseiniya.
Yeah, sometimes
I never see them in religious
there's
centers.
also an intellectual maturity. There's an intellectual immaturity sometimes in our communities across the board, not just in interfaith. So even when you have a theological difference with somebody, people can't appreciate, okay, this particular mosque does this in this way, but this mosque does it in this way. And at the end of the day, we're all brothers of one another. And at the end of the day, we might even reach the paths in a different way, but we can still engage in a sit down. I'll either agree with you at the end, or I might disagree with you at the end. But it doesn't mean that we end up wanting to destroy each other.
Irony of some of these guys, you can look up who the trustees are. They're the ones who've actively, like you have one center in Luton where members of the Shia community called the police on another group of members of the center. These are the same people who claim that they stand for human rights in the Shia community.
Sure.
So it's farcical that they are willing to throw their own brothers under the bus because of a theological division. Please look it up and show it. Because you'll find Luton Shia police, okay, and Azadari, and see what comes up.
So what was the story of that?
Some of the brothers practicing a tradition of Azadari in the Husseiniya. There's a division, there's a political division of which marja you follow. Let's take them down by saying they're doing this bloodletting, ritualistic practice in the mosque, and this is illegal activity, and it goes against medical ethics, etc., etc. Now, trying to say the health and safety and medical exit. And look, I was witness to that. Some of those community members were saying to them, let's do things with, let's put the hygiene thing in place. Let's use the right, And for me, it's like, I don't believe that we should restrict people from a practice that they believe is sacred for them. Okay? Sure. We should defend their right to do that, because once the authorities are called in to interfere in how we practice our faith through Azadari, it's going to be called in to other matters, what we say on the minbar, etc. Yeah. So it's really sickening that we've got people like that in the community, and they need to be exposed. But I'm not going to do it because I'm not brave enough, if I be honest.
Police called to Shia Mosque in Luton as dispute rages over a bloodletting ceremony. Bedfordshire police were called to a Shia Mosque in Luton on Tuesday night over a dispute about the practice of zanjir, zani, or self-flagellation with blades. And this was Shia who were snitching on Shia. That's very interesting.
It's really sad. I can say I've never, and this is where I get very disappointed, because David Miller worked with these people. And you can follow. He does these, unfortunately, it's this colonial mindset almost. It's like we get a white man to front it because we believe them.
Sure.
Yeah? Just like how these guys were infiltrated by Catherine Shackdam. If we want to expose them, there's a lot we can say. They, don't think she reached Iran because she infiltrated the UK groups who claim to be loyalists.
Sure.
Okay? Or they allowed her access. We don't know what their agenda is, but there's a really scary thing that's happening, that labeling and pointing out. And there's no taqwa in saying actually, and this is what we do. When I say it disappoints me, because people know, no one doubts how much contribution I've done to the Shia community, how many people I've helped, and how many Shia community members have visited people in prisons, in hospitals. Okay? Me and Sayed Ammar, remember when we used to visit people in hospitals?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a beautiful service. The only challenge was after us visiting them, they all died after a day. So it was a really bad situation that,
clearly my du'as were not working.
We create this amazing initiative.
Yeah. I remember very well.
We were taking the youth and we said, let's go and help people whose parents are literally on like deathbed. Let's go and support them. Let's try and show them that we're there for them.
No, Shagdam done a number on these people, on the Shia activists, because she infiltrated a number of television channels. She talked about how, and she discusses it quite publicly today, but a lot of people who were saying she's right and look at who she's attacking, we support her the whole way, they went very quiet afterwards.
What's very worrying is that no one talks about how she infiltrated British institutions. She doesn't talk about it. Is she protecting people who were allowing that, facilitating that at that time? Because that's not being documented. No one's talking about it. How about those people? Where are the community members who are calling for accountability, asking for accountability for having someone who infiltrated the community, who's openly said it, and has anyone actually asked them, what did you do? Why did you allow them in?
There are still Facebook conversations online of who Shakdam was being supported by, and people would be flabbergasted if they saw the names of these people.
It's shocking.
But Shakdam has done a number of them. And they believed in her wholeheartedly. It just goes to show you how fickle sometimes people's opinions are. That one minute they're saying, this is so true, I've got all the facts, I've got all the figures, and then later on egg on their face and they really don't know what to say.
So sadly, we've just got to, look, we can't use underhanded tactics that they do. Using AI to create these fake reports and spread misinformation. It's not something that we can do. We have a much higher ground.
Sure.
And we have to always maintain that. They're trying to draw us down. And I think we've got to be like, I guess that's where some people say to me, why don't you play dirty like them? Why don't you do this?
That's the worst thing you can do.
That is really, it's really not what we want to do.
The worst thing you can do is lower yourself to these types of tactics. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then they knows your actions, knows my actions, knows everybody else's actions. You're going to have to answer God on the day of judgment. In all honesty, if you're going to stoop that low, the mission that you had, the vision that you have is all, unfortunately...
The irony is they don't respect their own scholars.
Yeah.
Look at the abuse they've abused their own scholars. The targeting, the division.
Yeah.
We claim to be Shias and we all respect hierarchy and authority. These are the same people who have betrayed Amir al-Mu'mineen. In reality, if you have a wakil of a marja who says don't do this, you expect people to respect that, not attack that. And it's disgusting.
Yeah, there's many examples we can look at throughout history of these things. But alhamdulillah, we've had this discussion. I've benefited immensely from this discussion. Thank you so much for coming on. Wallah, it's a pleasure. And I hope, people, it's good points for reflection as well. Everybody can reflect at home on these very important points. At the end of the day, everybody in the community is trying to serve in different ways. And sometimes, whether it's on the political, on the interfaith, on the local sphere, everybody's trying their hardest to hopefully bring a better world, bring a more peaceful world for each and every one of us. And that brings me on to an interesting segment that a couple of weeks ago, as you all know, I had replied to the Yaqeen Institute, and in particular to Imam Tom Facchine on his segment and his series on Shia Islam. And we just heard the news that Imam Tom apologized for the lecture that he had given. And we can see the clip just over here.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Imam Tom here. As we approach the season of Hajj, I wanted to offer some reflections in the wake of the Iran series that we published. And I think that it's good that the series generated a lot of conversation. We got a lot of feedback, both positive and negative, about the series. And one of the things that I reflected on is our allegiance to the truth, right? Our allegiance being to the truth above everything else. And as somebody who converted to Islam, I like to think that or at least I aspire to, always have my allegiance be to the truth, even if I made one mistake, I would rather own that and adjust than double down on something that was wrong just because that's what I happened to believe or say yesterday. So there were definitely some mistakes that were made in the series, and we've taken that seriously, and I personally take full accountability for that. And we're going to be, I think, sunsetting one of the episodes. Intent behind the series, which I think it is a good thing to keep in mind. The intent behind the series was to demonstrate that solidarity with people is not predicated on agreeing with them. And it's also not predicated upon a relativistic sense of morality where you just say, oh, well, we have our perspective and they have their perspective. No, you can actually really, really strongly disagree with someone and still have solidarity for them. And so that's why the analogy I gave, the example I gave about the ummah, which I'll repeat here, that was in the series, is that the ummah is like one house. And every house has multiple rooms. And those rooms are separated by walls, and sometimes those rooms are even separated by floors. So the contact that you have with the different rooms is very, very different. But one thing that's important to keep in mind is that when it comes to any house, the thickest wall is always the exterior wall. It's never the interior walls. So the walls that separate the rooms of a house are always thinner than the wall that's supposed to separate everything in the house from everything outside of the house. And so as we're upon Hajj season, and who knows what's going to go on geopolitically, we might see a resumption of hostilities, and we hope that that doesn't happen. We want to be very, very clear that our solidarity is clear, and it is with the truth, and it is with who is on the truth or the side of truth in this particular instance. And I think that Hajj in particular, and the season of Hajj, is a very, very important season and an appropriate season to make these reflections, because we see the unifying nature of the 5 pillars of Islam. And we mentioned in the series about how, we have the same salah, and we have the same qibla, and we have the same Quran, that these are things that are their rallying points. And so as we focus our energy and our attention on the Haramain, Mecca and Medina, and people who are...
Congratulations to Sayed Ammar Live and the team, because the reality is a lot of this is due to the reply on Sayed Ammar Live. There is absolutely no doubt about that. The hard work of the team. If you haven't watched the episode, go and watch the episode. I told you, and I've told you a million times, discussing Sunni Shia has got more positives than it has negatives. And for a number of years, people kept saying to us, don't discuss these things. It's only going to bring more friction and more fracture. Look here, you have somebody, a learned scholar, an academic, and arguably the most important Sunni institution in the United States of America, who, because of our reply, had to apologize. Not just apologize. He also had to delete the episode because of the fact that a whole madhab had certain statements made about it that were incorrect. The easiest thing that could have been done was to invite a Shia scholar who, from the framework of Shia literature, would have been able to explain to you the development of Shi'ism. But normally, what do we see? A Sunni scholar using the framework of Sunni literature trying to explain Shia thought. In the future, therefore, do not tell us how to do our job. And do not tell us that if you discuss Sunni Shia, that is sowing discord. Because here an imam, a convert to the religion of Islam, who had a certain understanding of Islam, has had to withdraw parts of that understanding, not delete 10 seconds or 20 seconds, delete a whole episode. And I wonder, Imam Tom, whether you will come towards the path of Ahlul Bayt now, because you've just clearly shown that the reason you chose Sunni Islam was because of a certain narrative that was given to you about Shia Islam. And in the matter of a month, that whole narrative has been dispelled. So now, Imam Tom, will your emotions get the better of you? They clearly haven't in one way, because you offered an apology. But is an apology enough when a person has now realized that some of the issues that you had with the madhab that you did not choose, and you may not have chosen it because you did not meet a single Shi'i as well, or you may not have chosen it because you had a narrative about Tashayyu' that did not bring you yaqeen. Now, Mr. Yaqeen Institute, have you found yaqeen? I hope you found yaqeen. And if you want to find more yaqeen, in terms of my narrative, then I'm more than willing to help you in that journey. And ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the guide. You decided, because of the climate, of the rise, of the popularity of Shi'ism, that you had to make a video on Sunni Shia. Because you saw so many becoming Shia. And you saw so many converting to Shi'ism. So you decided that it was in your good wisdom that you would produce 4 parts on this. But it may have opened your eyes, and it may be a turning point for you. Secondly, again, something I've always stressed. There is more than one reading on the history of the religion of Islam. I don't mind if someone takes the Sunni reading, but let the Shi'i explain the Shi'i reading. Number 3, when there are Sunni institutes teaching Islam, I would be delighted if there are modules which are taught by Shia scholars. And at North America, you have some fantastic Shia scholars. Invite them to teach the module on Shia law or on Islamic law. Someone says, no, just on Shia law. No, why just on Shia law? Why not a Shia teach Islamic law at a Sunni institute? He can teach, for example, Ja'fari law, and then he can teach comparative law and take Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Mughniya's book with him, and he'll easily be able to teach this. When I see Yaqeen Institute, or I see Bayyana, or I see Zaytuna, or I see any of these other institutes, to me, if we are one ummah and we want unity, it is when I invite some of the most learned scholars in North America to be on the faculty of an Islamic seminary. I have seen Shia seminaries, Islamic College in London, Al-Mahdi in Birmingham, others I have seen who have Sunni faculty. Why? What's the problem of having Sunni faculty? There are Sunni ulama who may teach a subject where they are able to also teach the Shia opinion. Who was it that I remember? I think Dr. Adnan Ibrahim had mentioned that he had the tafsir al-Mizan of Allama Tabatabai. And An-Nabulsi had said to him, do you know what these Shia believe? He said, but listen, there are gems of knowledge that I can gain. You want true Sunni Shia unity, not the one that people put up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram just to get more likes and views, but the real Shia Sunni unity is the one where faculties of Islamic studies, divinity schools, theological schools are inviting Shia or Sunni faculty to teach. Even if you invite me to teach, I'm a different person when I'm teaching in the class than I am on the pulpit. On the pulpit, I'm in a Muharram mode and we are passionate Hussainis, but academically, I am back to being a normal teacher again. Not that I need to be on your faculty, but there are some North American Shia scholars who would die to be on a faculty with Umar Sulaiman and Zaid Shakir and Yasser Qadhi and Suhaib Webb and Nu'man Ali Khan and Tom Facchine. They're dying for that recognition. Give them that recognition, I beg you. Wallah, they're trying their hardest to communicate with you. They're trying their hardest to be best friends with you. Give them that recognition. Let them, give them something. Give them also a nice sum, a nice hadiyah that will make ends meet for them. Now that Islam is going to be their last resort for earning whatever doubts they have about the religion, give them a chance to teach at your institution. So someone gives them some position in society. Because let's be real, when Imam Tom Facchine replies, or anyone else replies, there's only a couple of us who people really care about their opinions. Everybody else who's going to talk about these things, majority of the people are not interested in what they've got to say. I'm being very frank with you. This one's got 200 views, 300 views, 500 views. This one's got another few thousand for the first. No one's really interested in reality. So let me be clear. You have a theological seminary, you have enough North American Shia Maulanas who would die for a job at your seminary because they have nothing going for them at the moment. Give them that chance, I'm begging you. Please open the door for them. And then you will see their expertise on their subject. Now, in terms of the Shia of you who have seen Imam Tom Facchine's change and his apology, this should be a lesson for all of you. That there's no need for you to be always scared of giving your opinion when eventually an imam, a prominent imam of the most important academic Sunni institution, one of them in North America, has to apologize. And Allah only knows how many thousands of years of scholars who have given the same opinions and misguided people away from the path of Ahlul Bayt. At least this man had the courtesy to apologize. There are so many others who are silent, knowing that they've given a misrepresentation. Sometimes people say to me, but Sayed Ammar, you know, the problem is we shouldn't be condescending towards somebody of a difference of opinion. As if Shia, when we're condescending, we have to be called out for it. I show you a clip of condescending over here. You'll see American preacher condescending, and yet they can get away with being condescending. Have a look at this condescending.
And any of those big scholars who like to talk about people, if they don't have the testicular fortitude to speak to them in their face, they're cowards. So you can talk about Hamza Yusuf all you want in your closet. Go to the man's face and say, you know what, I think you're Ahlul Bidah. Go to Yasir Qadhi. You so hard about Yasir Qadhi all day long. Go down to Memphis, Tennessee, because they got them country fellas, swamp people. Go to Sheikh Yasir and say, you know what, I think you're wrong. Then I'll respect you. But for you to get a group of little teenage kids who live in the suburbs and got nice iMacs, and their mama and daddy's got them full Skype with a credit card, and they're able to sit there and listen to you all night long, oh, you're just a really big, bad, brave man. And you don't even let people put comments on your YouTube page, you're so scared. Milkshake. Yeah. And you know what's scary about that person? Has absolutely no training in the deen.
This person, Suhaib Webb, all he lives off right now is making videos about how people like me should be removed so that we can have true Shia-Sunni unity and Shia-Sunni dialogue. Removed by who? Who are you as the barometer to decide who should be removed? You want to talk about condescending and how Shia shouldn't be condescending. Go and teach these guys how not to be condescending. Sometimes even the problem with the Shia is that they don't leave room for anyone for changing or evolving. As if people like myself or others can never change, can never evolve, can never grow, can never mature. Only Yasir Qadhi is allowed to grow and evolve and change and mature. Have a look at this clip of Yasir Qadhi, way before the refined version that we all see in the world today. Look at him before, but he's allowed to change. No one gets stuck to an opinion of his from years back that made them call him this and that. Look at this.
In regards to the Shias, really they are the most lying sect of Islam. In other words, they are, it is a part of the religion, taqiyya. One of their concepts of the religion is that it's allowed for them to lie. Okay? So if you were to ask a Shia, do you believe this, do you believe this, do you believe this? He's going to say, no, 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 no. If you go to their books, this is now where the beliefs are clearly outlined, including the belief that you can lie. They have a ascription to one of their imams, lying is 9/10 of this religion. Now, by the way, I'm speaking of the Shia religion based upon certain knowledge. I have their main book called Usul al-Kafi. I have looked over it, I have read their chapters, okay? I know what the Shias believe. I'm not taking this from what the Shias say. The Shias are allowed to lie, and it's their religion to lie. Okay? Any person who knows the Shias knows this. It is their religion to lie. 90% of the religion, by their own statement, is lying. They are allowed to lie. And this goes back to historical reasons. So don't go and ask Shias what they believe. Go straight to their source books. Well, actually, right now you shouldn't even be reading their books. So I'm saying,
right now, you shouldn't even be reading their books. That was Yasir Qadhi of the past. And now Yasir Qadhi is a much more refined version. For the Sunni world, many may not know this, but for the Shia world, there is an epidemic. When you hold on to someone's opinions from the past, you can never let go of them. But when it comes to working with Yasir Qadhi can change. But if it's a Shia can never change. And that sometimes is an inferiority complex which comes from certain people who claim to represent Tashayyu'. They pick and choose who they like and they pick and choose who they idolize. But overall, alhamdulillah, we were happy to hear of this news, and hopefully there is more engagement, and hopefully some of these points can also be points which can benefit us for even further dialogue. Now, in terms of Baffled of the Week, we always have one clip that baffles us, but we're not allowed to comment on it, Fieldy. Okay, you're still awake or no? Because I know you're on the verge of knocking out, but just try and hang in a little bit, Fieldy, before you knock out, okay? So there's always one clip of the week. We say it's the Baffled of the Week, but you cannot comment. You just have to look baffled. I'm not going to comment.
I want Donald Trump, right, to make England great again.
How would he do that though? What would you want to do?
I want him to buy England like he wanted to buy Canada and make us a state that we're proud of.
You want to be part of the United States?
Yes, because that's the only solution.
We're not allowed to comment, but that was Baffled of the Week. Anyone who knows that England's for sale, let's see if we can put it in one of the Savills or Knight Frank auctions and see what we get, inshallah. Especially we're sitting with somebody here who owns maybe 500 properties in the UK. So he would be very interested, I'm sure, in buying, inshallah, as well. Now, we come back to Minhal, Dr. Minhal Al-Khafaji. Are you there? Again. Salam. Dr. Minhal, a few reflections on today's show, please.
Wallah, I think Mustafa raised so many good points. Were you
listening or no? Tell me the truth. Were you listening or no?
Yeah, wallah.
I was. I know you. You could have easily knocked out and then in the last second just jumped up and said that I'm just going to say what's good points.
Quick 20-minute kip. Listen. No. The lack of confidence that he was talking about in the Shia community to actually make their voices heard. I think that's a very big point. And you touched on something as well, Sayed, in your response to Imam Tom, which is this whole inferiority complex that we have. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know why we have such an inferiority complex and we're so apologetic and it's like we're treading on water, that we can't have a voice, we can't have a say, we haven't taken our rights in this country to actually be heard. I
think the point that I benefited from Mustafa a lot was the point on, if it is engagement, it's only protest.
Yeah.
It's never like, let me come and plant trees in a local, or let me build something for the homeless. It's always, there's an international political situation. I'm going to protest it. This government's atrocious. There's no need to dialogue. There is never, ever, from the people who always are protesting, you rarely see that this guy's donated for a big youth shelter somewhere. It's always everybody's bad, everything's negative, and our role over here is to expose everything.
It's not even just that. It's this whole idea of my way or the highway. We protest, we want our demands, we want this. We don't want to sit and talk. We don't want to sit and discuss. We don't want to sit and negotiate. No. It's our way or the highway.
If that was Iraqi, how would you translate that? Our way or the highway?
لا طريقي لا طريق السريع. I don't know.
Now tell me, we come to our favorite segment. Everybody waits for this segment. Basri, bring it on. Which clips do you have for us so that we can understand what's in the wonderful Iraqi mind?
So sushi is, I think, one of our favorite foods, Sayed. We love sushi. We've been out for sushi many times.
Love.
And let's find out where we think the origin of sushi came from.
ما هي الدولة التي اشتهرت بالسوشي؟ سهلة.
Lumbar.
ما هي الدولة التي اشتهرت بالسوشي؟ سهلة.
لمبا.
Hey, did Anbar start sushi? I don't think you're gonna put sushi on an Iraqi menu, are you?
No,
Baghdad's got a couple of restaurants now. I think Dijla Village
Yeah.
has a but you know, once me and Sheikh Mohammed Shamsa were in Mumbai, India, and we'd gone there for a wedding. So it's lunchtime. So he's like, "Shrah nakul." So I'm like, "Simech," because I've got sushi in my head. So he's like, "Let's go and eat simech." Little did he know that he's about to encounter sushi and not mezgoof. All right. So when the simech came, he's like, "Shnai, muqabbalat?" قلت له لا قلت له much better you see here, bro. He's like, "Shnai, sandwich timman simech." Because the way it looks, the roll, it looked like sandwich tomato simech. So I was like to him, "Are you gonna?" He goes, and then another one was who? Ahmed Riyadh. Ahmed Riyadh was with us in Cairo. He's starving the whole day. Ahmed Riyadh has to have timman, betinjan, bagilla, fasolia, marag. You cannot bring anything new in the house. I think he'd divorce his wife if she cooked pasta. Yeah. And I took him for sushi, bro. He was staring at my face, saying to me, "Shino hi, who eats this?" But I don't think it came from Anbar.
No, but listen. You know the clip at the end where the guy's holding two bones? The rice didn't even look like the correct rice.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me. Next clip, where are we going?
Next clip, we are going to a security guard who, I don't know if he's securing the perimeter very well.
انت حارس؟ اي والله حارس. اي باب. هم صارت هنا حوادث تصير نسمع حوادث بوق ما بوق شغلات تصير. كان تلمن حارس اذا تصير.
That's a solid one. Translate for the viewers.
So just the background, Al-Aziz is one of the most loved household names in Iraq. He does these street interviews. So he goes to him, "Oh, you're a security guard?" He goes to him, "Yeah." He goes, Do you also see like robberies and thefts in this area?" He goes, "Yeah, it happens quite a bit." He goes, "Why are you a security guard then?"
That's a solid one. And your final one?
The final one, we go to the Mashaya. You know, after a long day of walking, you want to eat something.
Yes.
And the market
walking from Najaf to Karbala, you're starving, and you can't wait for that meal at some mokib. Yep.
Yeah, and one particular Zaire got the wrong idea about what they were gonna serve him.
وانا صار لي ساعة منتظر ومكيف اشتري ايش عبالي ولا حسين ها عبالي راح ينزلون اكل هنا مدينة الزهرين هاي طلع غسل عمامته عبالي سفرة ولا عبالي
Translate.
So he goes, "I'm in Medina Zaharin between Najaf and Karbala." So he's getting close to Karbala. He goes, "I've been sat here for an hour and I'm happy and I'm seeing that it's a sufra, that they're going to lay the food out." He goes, "It turns out it's a sheikh. He's washed his imam and he's wrapping it again."
Because of course, Maulanas, their turbans, there's a particular skill to wrapping the turban and so on. So this guy's sitting there waiting for the munch and he doesn't realize that somebody was just rolling a turban for somebody. You at that time would have either said kufr or boksat.
Where's the chai, bro?
Where's the chai? And we're going to end it with where's the chai. Mustafa Field, thank you so much. Mufti Minhal Al-Khafaji, thank you so much. Everybody at home, thank you all so much. God bless. Don't forget to make sure that you subscribe to the Sayed Ammar Live. And I've got a book of the week for all of you. So just wait, please. Which book of the week today? I've got this book over here, which I want to recommend to all of you. of my very close friend and a brilliantly researched text. All of you could see here, Opposing the Imam. The book Opposing the Imam, The Legacy of the Nawasib in Islamic Literature by Professor Nabil Hussain. Nabil is a good friend of mine. It's one of the best books I've seen about the hatred to Imam Ali in Islamic history. And brilliantly researched work. This book he gave me personally. And his lovely message to me, dear Sayed, thank you for many years of generosity and encouragement. We instantly hit it off in the winter of 2009 when you were invited to MIT, of course in Boston, to deliver a Shiaism talk, and you were excited to meet a graduate student interested in history. When I made the move to Miami, you had it all sorted for me. I really appreciate that. Thank you for setting the standard for delivering lectures to the community. Your lectures are insightful, dynamic, and beautifully organized. Your work has spread a generation to find strength, or inspired a generation to find strength in their new faith. I pray through all the trials you faced, your friends and family to give you support. I hope you accept this book, Professor Nabil Hussain. Very touching message from Professor Nabil. I really recommend you to read this. It's brilliant, brilliant academic work opposing the Imam, the legacy of the Nawasib in Islamic literature. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.